Welcome back to the Gateway to Wisdom. Today, we explore Proverbs chapter 20. This chapter serves as a profound manual for self-mastery and social integrity. From the dangers of excess to the subtle deceptions of the marketplace, Solomon reveals that a well-lived life is built on restraint and a heart that seeks God's light. Let's discover how these ancient couplets offer clarity for our modern complexities. Wine is a mocker and beer a brawler. Whoever is led astray by them is not wise. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 1. Solomon begins with a stark warning against intoxicants. Wine is personified as a mocker because it robs a person of their dignity and judgment, while beer fuels the impulse to fight. Wisdom is characterized by self-control, recognizing that anything that leads to a loss of agency is a snare. In ancient Israel, wine was a staple, but its abuse was a gateway to social disgrace. Today, we live in a culture that often glamorizes overconsumption and escapism. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 1 reminds us that true wisdom requires the cool spirit of moderation to avoid the mouthful of gravel that vice produces. Sluggards do not plow in season, so at harvest time they look but find nothing. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 4. Solomon uses the agrarian cycle to illustrate the act-consequence connection. The sluggard fails to recognize the God-given season of opportunity, and thus eats the fruit of his own negligence. Ancient survival depended on the harvest. In our modern distraction economy, the sluggard manifests as one who procrastinates through worthless pursuits, like endless scrolling. Proverbs warns that a lack of professional discipline leads to a future where we look but find nothing. The purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight draws them out. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 5. Human motives are compared to deep waters, suggesting a quality of hidden depth. Wisdom requires the skill of discernment to navigate these depths, not just in others, but in ourselves. Ancient sages spent years in studied observation of behavior. Today we often settle for surface-level connections and hustle. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 5 invites us to slow down and practice intentional empathy, drawing out the deep-seated purposes that drive our decisions. Diverse weights and diverse measures are both alike an abomination to the Lord. Bad, bad, says the buyer, then goes away and boasts. Food gained by fraud tastes sweet to a man, but he ends up with a mouthful of gravel. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 10, verse 14, verse 17, and verse 23. Honesty in trade is a spiritual act. Solomon condemns the double standard, using one weight to buy and another to sell, as an abomination. Deceitful gain is a quote, fleeting vapor. It appears sweet initially but ultimately results in a painful and gravel-filled existence. In the biblical city gate, this was about physical stones on a scale. Today, it applies to corporate transparency, hidden fees, and ethical marketing. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 17 reminds us that stolen water, or fraudulent profit, never provides the lasting satisfaction that honest labor achieves. A gossip betrays a confidence, so avoid anyone who talks too much. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 19. Wisdom requires the skill of the closed lip. Gossip acts as a social poison that enters the inmost parts, causing wounds that are nearly impossible to blot out. While biblical gossip happened in the village square, modern gossip travels instantly through social media, tasty trifles. Proverbs calls us to be the trustworthy spirit who can keep a secret, recognizing that sin is not ended by multiplying words. A person's steps are directed by the Lord. How then can anyone understand their own way? Proverbs chapter 20, verse 24. This is the theological climax of the chapter. While humans are responsible for planning, the final outcome remains in God's sovereign control. We are invited to trust the Creator's governance even when His ways are inscrutable to us. Modern life hacks promise fulfillment through total control of our schedule. Solomon offers a spiritual grammar for living. True security is found only in submission to the Creator, which provides a resilience that allows us to smile at the future. The human spirit is the lamp of the Lord that sheds light on one's inmost being. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 27. The spirit of man acts as a divine searchlight, allowing for the internal reflection necessary to align one's life with God's moral order. It is the means by which we weigh our ways before the all-seeing eye of God. We live in a world of constant external noise. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 27 calls us back to the interior mirror, teaching that the greatest technical skill is the ability to look inward and allow God's truth to light up our hidden places. Proverbs chapter 20 tells us that wisdom is more than facts. It is the skill for living that shapes our hearts and our work. Every choice to practice integrity and restraint is a step toward life indeed. Subscribe and join us next time as we explore the King's heart in chapter 21.